Good morning. This is Rosario Aurelius. Today I'm going to be talking about spirit painting. We were supposed to have the class tonight, but due to unforeseen circumstances, we're not able to, so I decided to produce a video on this class. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I can also send you digital copies of the files if need be. So let's begin, shall we? So, as I said, my name is Rosario Aurelius. I am an author, scholar, artist, and witch local to the St. Louis area. I am passionate about art, magic, divination, and spirituality. In my own practice, I am strongly influenced by Thelema, a religion and philosophy focused on the cultivation of one's true will. I'm also a spirit painter, and tonight I'm going to be talking about spirit painting. Spirit painting, as we understand it, actually kind of evolved out of the spiritualism of the 19th century. But in my notes, I've traced it back to the 15th century. So I'm going to actually start by talking about its presence in the 15th century. So in the 15th century, we have a figure named Lorenzo de' Medici, who was a philanthropist tutored by the Neoplatonist Marsilio Ficino. Medici was deeply inspired by Sandro Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, and he collaborated with artists, musicians, poets, and scholars who also believed in a mystical union with divinity through the continuity of beauty. Neoplatonism posits that perfection and joy were attainable in one's lifetime without the need for awaiting the afterlife. So right here in the 15th century, we can already see how art is being influenced by the spiritual movements and the humanistic movements of the times. And this will continue forth from this point as we get up to the 19th century. In the 16th century, mystical or inspired art in the Renaissance revealed a spiritual union expressed through religion and spiritual trends that arose from the work from humanism, individuality, and secularization of daily life. These became prominent themes of the time period. The artwork slowly moved away from a central religious authority into more personal and transpersonal expressions. Humanism considers the welfare needs of humankind to be paramount, shifting the focus from external divinity to personal godhood. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is an early example of cadaver sketches which became useful in the studies of anatomy, physiology, and sacred geometry of the human body. In Raffaello Sanzo's work, the Disputation of the Holy Sacrament, he also portrays both the lower world and the higher world and a community of heaven or a community of saints. Here we find Catholicism used to explore the divisions of heaven. Many of these artists encoded the spiritual sciences in their work because doing so openly without support from powerful patrons could at best lead to imprisonment and at worst, execution. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel is another example of this type of work. Michelangelo, his project was very labor intensive and portrayed cathedral scenes of humanism and Neoplatonism. This piece depicts choirs of angelic forces. Here we can see the structure or hierarchy of angelic or higher realms. This is not counterintuitive as it reveals the influence of these spiritual sciences on the artists of the time. In the 17th century, Europe moves more into still lifes, landscapes, and scenes of daily life, aiming for artistic replication of observed reality. This represents a heightened interest in the developing sciences of the time: medical, astronomical, astrological, and spiritual sciences such as Hermeticism, but also religion and politics. For example, Caravaggio's Light and Shadow evoke drama that was used to help promote the Catholic revival of the 16th century. In contrast to those dark tones, Peter Paul Rubens surrounds his figures with flowers and fruit. Though it speaks to the still life motif, these symbols highlight the role of the natural world and mankind's union with it, featuring also the fecundity and fertility of the earth paired with the creativity and sexual energy of the realm of water or the sea. So we start to see a lot of historical, cultural, political, religious, spiritual, and scientific nuances of the times through the work. We can see how these spiritual sciences influence artists and thereby influence the culture. This will be important when we get to the 19th century. In the 18th century, the Enlightenment era pushed further away from divine religious authority towards scientific reformations. As Neoplatonists continued to express the spiritual union with nature, we see this very clearly in the works of William Blake. I'll be featuring this image in this video, The Great Red Dragon and the Woman Clothed with the Sun. This is a favorite of mine as it explores elements of Satanism and Luciferianism, but also gets to the heart of the spiritual union I've so far been tracking since the 15th century. This time as a pair of etheric lovers. Now we get to the 19th century. Up until the 19th century, art historians identify the corpus of this work as religious or mystical art. It isn't until the 19th century that we see a shift occur between mystic art and spiritual arts. The 19th century is sharply defined by movements such as spiritualism, theosophy, and anthroposophy. Spiritualism teaches that the spirits or souls of the dead commune with the living, revealing that ours is a truly spiritual world. Theosophy teaches that there is a deeper spiritual reality, and that contact with that reality happens through intuition, meditation, etc. Anthroposophy argues that the psychic and cosmic evolution was possible through spiritual science and new technologies, making it possible to perceive and interact with the fourth dimension of space-time. In my opinion, of all of these, this last point is the most significant to spirit painting. So for this section of the 19th century, I'm going to be looking at a number of different artists, and we'll be sharing samples of work from these artists. So the first one I'm going to look at, her name was Georgiana Houghton. She was an English spiritualist and painted with the aid of spirit allies, and she is sometimes considered the mother of spirit painting within the 19th century and with respect to spiritualism's influence on the subject of spirit painting. Alexander Cozen's block drawings predated the Rorschach test used by psychologists. It also shows that shapes are made visible through the blot ink with positive and negative space. And as our eyes focus on positive and negative space, they tend to form different shapes, maybe things that we identify with or that our brains recognize, of images that are familiar to us. Harold Sharp's orographs are semicircular images with line and color. He was guided by a spirit ally he called Shen Qi. While traveling to the birthplace of his spirit ally, Harold Sharp learned that Shen Qi had been an engraver during his lifetime in China. So this last example brings us not only the hypothesis and the theory of spiritualism through spirit painting, but some confirmation as well. Austin Osman Spare, draftsman and occultist, explored automatic drawings and found that they tap the depths of the subconscious mind. His work still plays a major role in modern occultism. Aleister Crowley, known for his work in Thelema by producing Thelema, known for his work on the Book of the Law in 1904, had a host of skills and talents, but was also a painter who experimented with similar methods as Spare. In Crowley's Rites of Eleusis, he brought together poetry, dance, and music to evoke the planetary energies. In his painting The Sun, he painted himself with solar imagery. Carl Jung, known for his project The Red Book, was a psychologist fascinated with mythic symbols. Much like Crowley, he practiced along similar lines. Jung's work focused on cultural and personal symbols for exploring the subconscious mind. The next piece is from Vasily Kandinsky. His focus on geometric objects and color explored the subconscious mind while reflecting his own spirituality. And next I have Hilma af Klimt's. Hilma af Klimt's artistry drew strongly from spiritualism and theosophy, and both Kandinsky and Klimt communicated through symbol, color, and shape. Salvador Dali's brand of surrealism brought to the surface his own desires and fears. Surrealism was the quintessential art movement of the 19th century. Their focus on art experiments almost perfectly models the practice of magical journaling and the scientific method. The Surrealists viewed the making of art as a scientific procedure and tested theories on different kinds of stimuli, substances, states of mind to see how it shaped the experience of making art and the end result. Salvador Dali is by far one of my favorite artists of all time. Skipping ahead to the 1970s, Kenneth Grant was an English Thelemite and occultist who drew strongly from Austin Spare's methods. In this piece, he was focused on lunar energies. This piece is followed by his wife Steffi Grant, featuring a series of trees of life converging on to the vanishing point of Malkuth, the sufferer of the earth. Following this, we have one by Rosaline Norton, an Australian artist known for her paintings of the god Pan. Lastly, I've added a few of my own pieces into this assemblage. I work in traditional mediums and also in digital art applications. AI art programs have really come sort of into vogue in the last 10 years and come to the attention of media over the last 5 as being useful for artists and digital creators. However, there's some debate on whether it has impacted the careers of traditional artists. However, I think of it as another way of transmitting messages from spiritual allies. It doesn't matter what the tools we're using are, whether it's traditional mediums or digital mediums. If we are working with spirit guides and allies in this kind of work, they can still communicate through us and to us what needs to be expressed. These are simply different tools for us to get the work done. I'll be sharing some of my personal work in this. I have a few select pieces I want to add to it. So this concludes the theory portion of this class. I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'll address the practical work. So in this half, I want to talk about techniques. So the history shows us that the early works represented moving away from central authority and seeking personal godhood. It shows us a human search for personal autonomy and also reveals in the 19th century that the artist acts as seer by partnering with spirit allies. Artist Pablo Picasso said his goal as an artist was to see the world as a child and to paint abstracts in that way. One of the major techniques still taught in art classes today is the method of automatism, and that's what we're going to use today. What is common with the art experiments we've seen today is that they were used in union with the lower self or the unconscious mind, which is commonly engaged in shadow work. Shadow work is what we do to resolve issues with our unconscious self. This work also engages the higher self, sometimes looked at as the superconscious mind, as we saw with Crowley's painting of the sun. The higher self and lower self are always in communication with one another. The higher self sees the larger blueprint of our lives, whereas the lower self deals with the minutiae. Lower self matters sometimes deal with emotional or spiritual baggage we set aside because it's too overwhelming to unpack in our daily lives. Making time daily for an activity like spirit painting can help to set aside a space devoted to unpacking those issues so that they don't become tidal waves that flood the shore. For example, if you have a conflict with a friend, your higher self might explain why it's important for the karmic relationship between you both, whereas the lower self can teach you how to navigate through the rough seas in your daily life. With the practice of automatism, and this can be done whether you're using canvas and a paintbrush, or a notebook and a pen, or a marker, or a pencil. The true technique for automatism is you close your eyes, you check in with your spirit guides, asking them for resolution to a problem. You might also work with an affirmation. And in that practice, when you put you take your tool, whether it's a brush, in this case it'll be a brush, and take it to your canvas, you're not actually planning out what you're going to paint. You're letting the spirit move through you, and the idea behind closing your eyes is so that you can't see what you're drawing, because if you can look at what you're drawing or painting, your brain might start to fill in ideas or images that you might not have intended originally, which could also be guides communicating to us, but in a different way. So one of the techniques is to close your eyes, and then just do the work by moving your hand on the canvas, on the paper, whatever the medium is. And then after like a couple minutes of doing that work, then opening your eyes and taking a look at what you produced. Because then sometimes it catches people off guard what kind of art they produce when they use this method. And sometimes it can be kind of like an eye-opener. There might be images that pop out that they hadn't noticed before, or there might be something that they see that they recognize as being a strong or pertinent influence in their life at that moment. Some other additions that I like to add to my classes on this subject for setting the right environment could be you could create an altar specific to spirit painting. You can cast a circle. And coming from a witchcraft background, that's something that I've done in the past. One of my most powerful experiences was where I cast sacred space before doing the painting and then produced the painting in a magical circle in a sacred space environment. Another idea would be to state an affirmation for what you'd like to learn, or if there is a problem that you're dealing with and you're looking for an answer for it, stating that affirmation in a positive way, not including any negatives, just speaking towards the current and towards the positive. Another way of setting the right environment would be to add music with the theme of your intention or your affirmation. And sometimes having a physical object that you can connect with can help you shift your consciousness from an ordinary state into a state where you feel receptive to and comfortable with taking on a practice like spirit painting. So when I'm teaching this class, I like to get everybody into a state of focus, and the best way to do that is when you're looking at your material and you're getting ready to do the work, sitting in stillness and taking in 3 slow, deep breaths and exhaling very slowly and gently. And then if you have a specific intention, you can take a minute to hold that intention before you begin. And the goal with these projects isn't necessarily producing great art or what we think of as great art, but getting into the right headspace and allowing the messages to move through us so that we can learn what we need to learn in a visual way and make those connections and see what it is we need to work on in our lives, because it'll be right there. It'll be visible through symbolism, through line, through color, through shadow, through positive and negative space. And it'll be impossible to miss. Sometimes the journey, it's the journey and not the destination that counts. So I'm going to spend a little time here working on a piece, and I'll check back in a few minutes. So for this particular project, I decided to put on some Egyptian music, and this is what turned out from the project. So what I would do with this is, if I had a client that I produced this for, I would sit and talk with my client about what these symbols, what the image overall means to my client. And we would have a conversation about it. And then I would advise them to take it home I'd maybe meditate on it over the following week to see if anything new comes from that work. But I like to keep them small when I make them for clients so that they can take them home and put them on any or in any particular sacred areas of their home so that when they see it, it may conjure further shadows for them to explore. And that's likely what I'm going to do with this one here at home. So as I mentioned before, I've taught this class several different times. I've taught this class in Festus, Missouri. I've taught this class in Granite City, Illinois. Trying to think anywhere else. And I taught a presentation on this at the St. Louis Pagan Picnic in Tower Grove Park. If you have any questions or comments about this and you want to reach out to me, I'll provide that information in the notes below. Thank you so much and have a great day.